Well, John, it is such a pleasure to talk to you about your book, The Caddie Who Won the Masters. I have to tell you, I've read a lot of golf books in my day, but this one was one that the moment I picked it up, within 2 pages, I was completely captivated. My husband was exactly the same way when he stole it away from me, and I'm so excited to talk to you. It's just such a pleasure to talk to the man who wrote a book I just love.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Gail. I'm delighted that you liked it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've written a lot of books. I mean, I don't know, 20, 25. I mean, I kind of lost count. But you've written, many of them are horror novels, which seems to be a stretch, jumping to writing about golf. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about what made you make that transition.
Well, a couple of things. As well we know, some days golf can be a real horror. So there is a connection in that way.
That's true.
But I always wanted to write about golf, and I had grown up on a country club as a caddy from the age of 10. And when I sort of ran out of ideas for horror novels, I always called myself the poor man Stephen King.
Mm.
I turned my attention to writing books about golf novels, and I had already done three instructional books back in the 70s. But I wanted to write about novels, and I wanted to write about a particular moment in time. And the hero of my childhood was Ben Hogan, so I started there, and I started from the point of view of a caddy, and then wrote The Caddy Who Knew Ben Hogan, and then from there I went to Walter Hagen, and much before my time, Hagen actually played at Midlothian Country Club, where I worked and caddied, which is a golf course on the south side of Chicago.
Mm.
I wrote a book about Hickory clubs and the transformation from Hickory into the steel shafts. A lot of my books, these golf books, are sort of novels of information. You learn a lot about the history of the sport and about the great players of the past, and that sort of all came together with the Masters book. As far as I know, there's not been a novel about the Masters, but it is for all of us the premier tournament of the year. So I turned my attention to the Masters and try to figure out a way to tell the story in a new way.
Yeah, no, well, we're going to get to that in a second, but you just mentioned and came to mind for me the instructional books that you've written, and I saw one back in 1973 called New Golf for Women, and that really surprised me because, frankly, very few people paid any attention to women golfers back then. What prompted you to do a book like that?
Well, I had Betty Jamieson, who was a pro back in the late 50s, 60s, early 60s, was someone who I knew, and she was I caddied for her, and she was actually won at Tamarshana, which was one of the first big tournaments in terms of prize money that on the PGA and on the LPGA tour. And I saw that there wasn't a book. I'd done a book on how young pros got onto the instructional book and how young pros got onto the tour in the late 60s. I think it came out in 1970, actually. Tom Watson, actually, who just won yesterday, was qualified for the PGA Tour at that event, and he's in the book, as is Lanny Watkins and Dave Graham and a few others. It was an exceptional year, and I just, by luck, happened to get it. And when I wrote that book, and then I decided to turn my attention to the women's tour, and I followed the women's tour for a while, and they were the most engaging women in the world. They were great to write about because, as you said, no one really paid much attention to them. And then the third book was to look at, and at the about a half a dozen years later, at the Playing with the Pros, which was about the senior tour and the pros that had gone and continued to play and do on the senior tour, and how their swing and their games had changed with the passage of time.
I'm going to have to read that. I think it's not going to just give me history, but it might help my game. You mentioned the Hickory clubs, and obviously you'd written a book about that. What I was curious about is I read about you that you belonged to the Society of Hickory Golfers, and I was curious, what does that society do, and what's it all about?
Well, it's actually rather. I got involved in Hickory and I do play with Hickory. it's a different swing, and you have to make sort of adjustments to it. But and of course, it's not only different. The shaft of the club is different, but also the ball is different. They're trying to go back to the original way golf was played. Let's say there's a certain element of nostalgia in it as they dress. The Hickory players dress in the as if they were playing in the 20s with +4s, and there's a certain stylistic thing about it as well. It's small and growing, and there's a series of tournaments that are held regionally throughout not only the United States but in Canada and also in England and Australia. So it's they might consider themselves purists, but it's also a different kind of game. It's much more inventive and much more creative than it is today. I mean, the modern golf bag is limited by 14 clubs, and there were famous stories of in fact, the reason they got to have limiting the number of clubs is because there are so many clubs in a player's bag, because they have a club for every kind of shot in the world. It was the swing changed. Brian Nelson was probably the first one to adapt to it, because him along with Ben Hogan, all of these players at that age, Sam Snead was another one, they all grew up as kids playing with hickory, and then when the steel shaft came along, they converted over to that. Light Horse Harry Cooper was another pro that I knew, who had been an early, while he was from England, he was an early Texas player. Talked to me about how the club, the way you swang a club was entirely different than the way you do it today, which is power. And of course, the clubs can handle it now. I mean, the equipment has taken over golf, not only in terms of the shafts of the clubs, but also the balls, which are ruining in many ways the old golf courses that we all know.
It's interesting, because I was reading as well a post you did, an article you did called "Illegal Golf in the Age of Hickory," and you talked about the now I'm not going to get this right, mallet?
Schenectady putter.
That's right. Yes.
Right. That was you're right. It was the cinder shaft on the putter that was only called that because it came out of a town called Schenectady in upstate New York.
Okay.
That's how that came about, and it was briefly banned, and now, of course, you may remember when Sam Snead was in his latter days trying to putt side saddle because of that difficulty with his in golf. What happens the thing that happens to players in terms of putting is that they're not able to keep steady over the putt. So now the long putter allows them to stand up at the ball and create a secure center of gravity for their stroke. And I was watching the senior tour yesterday, and there's quite a wide variety of long putters.
Yeah. Well, given that you are part of the Society for Hickory Golfers and more of the traditional way of playing, I was wondering what your opinion was on using the long putters in pro tournaments.
Well, I'm really a purist in that sense, and I still putt, quote unquote, traditionally.
Good.
Although I can see that the belly putter makes a lot of sense. In fact, one of the character, and I talk about that in my novel, the Caddie who won the Masters. This is an older player. He's quote unquote older, 49. And he has traditionally won one tournament using the belly putter, and then he switches. And I see the advantage. If it helps people play golf longer, I'm all for it. You notice that there's a lot of young players on the tour, on the PGA Tour, who are using some variety of the long putter. Light Horse Harry Cooper, who was, as I said, was someone who I knew, who was in New York, was a long-time teaching pro. and actually did not. He came close to winning several major tournaments. He did win the Canadian Open several times, but he said that the secret of putting, you want to improve your putting, was to reverse your hands on the shaft of the putter. So that's about as far as he would go on, and he thought that was the key to being a good putter. And I noticed that you're seeing a lot of that kind of changing, and of course you're getting the claw group grip now. I saw Sergio using it now, and he's had many years of bad putting. If he could only putt, he'd be as great as Tiger, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's amazing. Okay, let's get on with the book. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there because some of the interesting things to talk about. But The Caddie Who Won the Masters is a book that combines fabulous historical facts about golf that, I had more aha moments reading it. Every second page there was something there that I didn't know. But you've combined it with a great fictional story, fantasy, even the supernatural, and how do you pull all of that together and tell a story that doesn't get wrapped up in any one part of that? It's not too historical, it's not too supernatural, but it's just this. You've got this beautiful balance.
The thing about a book like that is there's so much fascinating, as you say, Gail, so much fascinating historical information that you can often ground in your history of, and fill the pages with too much material. So the idea is smoothing it out a little at a time and blending it into the plot so that it makes a difference. It contributes to this present day story. What I wanted to do was to come up with a structure which was really pretty easy, because I decided at the beginning that I would structure it around the Masters Week, beginning on Sunday. So it goes from Sunday to Sunday. So that gave me a framework which I could build my house of the novel. Then I had to decide on what kind of approach to take. And in that case, I decided to go with a famous story about Bobby Jones, who, as you know, created the tournament and the golf course. Always wanted an amateur to win the tournament.
And it was so intimate that you could bring us into the book, and we actually lived all the shots and all the emotions.
Well, one thing is that I had going for me, of course, is I play golf, and so you have that intimate. You understand the game from the inside, being a player. Secondly, I had only been to actually Augusta once, although I've watched it, forever as a fan. So, and then but before you begin to write, you look at and you read all the histories of it, and decide on a point of view. In my case, as I mentioned, was the amateur. Then you had to have the hook, as I would call it, which was, what's the story going to be about? It's going to be about an amateur winning this because Bobby Jones always wanted an amateur to win it. Now, unlike the other two books I wrote, the Hogan book, which is set in shortly before, in the summer before he had his tragic accident in Texas, and that would be in 1948, and the Hagen book, which is set in the 1946, right after the war. This book takes place, quote unquote, today. So in other words, I've got real characters, real players in the tournament. Tiger Woods being one of them, and all the current sort of players of today playing in the tournament. So it's a present day story. So I can't anticipate who's going to win the next Masters, but I can involve them and then create a character who might, as an amateur, might win and fulfill the dream of Bobby Jones. So I blended that in. Then I wanted to have a backstory, which, as you know, is why win this? Well, we have a famous story of the second person to create the Augusta National and the Masters tournament, with Cliff Roberts, and Cliff committed suicide on the golf course in the late 70s. So I had that as I could use that material. then I took it out, stepped back a little bit and said, what other book or movie really affected me? And was The Field of Dreams, which is about baseball. And I said, what if we had a Field of Dreams about golf? It would then allow me to draw back into the story all the great golfers from the Masters history. I'll stop there so I don't give too much away of it.
And I won't give too much away. You brought up Cliff Roberts, and I have to say, he's one of many characters in this book. One of the hardest characters for me to like, and yet at the same time, I just was drawn to him and the demons that he faced, and given the fact that he did, commit suicide on the course. But then you have so many memorable and likable, not so likable, characters throughout the book. How many of these did you draw on your own personal experience, or yourself even? I see some similarities between you and Tim, just a little.
Well, he's got a few years on me. So he's, a college professor, and I work at a college, so I was comfortable writing about his background, and that fitted in. I knew the place he went to school, I knew about it, although I've actually never been on that campus. I knew something about it, and I checked out facts with friends of mine who were professors there, so that I had the little small details would be true about the area, because it's all, God is in the details. So right, and in terms of the Masters itself and the tournament and the way the course was, that's really important for anybody who's interested in golf. Someone like yourself, you know when something's wrong. And if something's wrong, then it ruins the whole book. And I had a friend of mine who was a caddy at the Augusta was able to read the book and say, really, on that whole problem lies on an X situation. So I was able to incorporate that into the text of the story.
Well, yeah.
And some of for example, the oldest pro that, the oldest amateur to ever to play in the Masters is someone I called up lives in New York. I called him up and talked to him about not so much about the tournament, but about the crow's nest. So I'd get a sense of the crow's nest, which is where the amateurs stay when they play.
Yeah, no, that sounds cute. The cell block kind of thing. It sounded like a very interesting place, and the characters who worked there were interesting. It was a pleasure. Just kind of, you felt like you were getting a guided tour from people who were right there. Well, it was a great book, and I just thank you so much for writing it. You've written two others, the Caddie Who Knew Ben Hogan. And the Caddie, the Slave with Hickory. Now, what is it next for you? Are you going to write another Caddie book, or have you got something else in the works?
Well, I've got a couple of ideas working with it. On the Caddie book side, there was I mentioned it earlier, the Tam O'Shanter, which was a famous tournament in the 50s. It gets started in the 40s and 50s, run by a man named George May, which was located outside of Chicago. And it was the first tournament ever broadcast on TV. And Lee Worsham made a spectacular eagle on the last hole to win it, which was basically the first half hour of television golf, and an eagle was made. And it's sort of like the Gene Sarazen's Freewood, or where the shot heard around the world,
right,
which created the Masters. And the Tam O'Shanter tournament was a world tournament where we had women's tournament, amateur tournament, pros tournament, and it was for 2 weeks long, and they paid golfers $50,000 at a time when most tournaments first prize was $1,000. I'm doing some research on that now, and I'm thinking that might be the next golf book that I do.
Oh, that would be great. Well, I'd love to read that. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful, John. Just before we close, I wanted to ask you, is there something you wanted to say about the book or anything at all, just to close off the interview?
Well, all these books are available if you go to Amazon. The best way to get them is go to Amazon.com, John Coyne or Caddie, and they'll pop up, and you can order them that way. This book is, the Master's book is also available as an e-book. They can read it as an e-book as well. The way all books are being produced now. So it's both both buy both as a trade paperback and also as a ebook.
We'll get out our Kindles then. That's perfect.
Right, get it on Kindle.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, John. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to reading your next book. And I'm going to go out and order on Amazon the other 2 books that you've written about Caddie, so I'm all caught up and ready for the next one.
Well, thanks. You've been terrific. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Take care.
Bye now.